This is Red Corner, Blue Corner, right here on Stadium. We're going to skip the cute intros for today. It's Jake Butt, former Michigan Wolverine, Joshua Perry, former Ohio State Buckeye. We got a lot to get to on this show, and we're not going to really be talking about games here in the First Black because there are a number of stories going on in college football right now, and it's changing the sport for better and for worse. And I want to start right in East Lansing. Jonathan Smith era is off to a little bit of a tough start. Noah Kim hops in the transfer portal. That would be the third Spartan quarterback to jump into the portal in a 48-hour span. They have no scholarship quarterbacks on that roster as of today. But Jonathan Smith, no worry for him because he can hop right in the portal. He could get a guy out of there. He can get his quarterback of the future. And he basically alluded to the fact that he was going to do that in his introductory press conference.
Yeah, well, let me stop you right there because let's hear what Nebraska's Matt Rhule had to say about QB shopping in the portal.
Make no mistake that a good quarterback in the portal costs, $1 million to $1.5 million to $2 million right now. So just on the same page, right? So let's make sure we all understand what's happening. So there's some teams that have $6 or $7 million players playing for them.
All right, well, he pretty much said the quiet part out loud there, right? $1 million to $1.5 million to $2 million to get a quality quarterback, starting caliber quarterback out of the transfer portal. And I think he's talking to the admin, the boosters a little bit here. I also think he's talking to the fans in some ways. And he's not the first coach that's done this.
Yeah.
You've spent time with PJ Fleck this year. I have as well. All he talks about behind closed doors and to the media at times is about how hard it is to get the talent that you need, right? Teams are raiding his roster because they have the money to get the players that he wants to keep around there. Ryan Day last year came out with the statement, it's going to take $12 million for us to be able to maintain our roster the way that it is. But I want to be clear about something. We are in the name, image, and likeness era. But to me, this is not name, image, and likeness. Let me get you the definition of what NIL really is. Name, image, and likeness, the three elements that make up the right of publicity, a legal concept to prevent or allow the use of an individual to promote a product or service. So when I start to dig into that, one thing that becomes pretty clear to me, and I think the NCAA has been clear about it, but they have no backbone and no ability to enforce some of the rules that they have created. None of this says we get to buy talent. None of this says pay for play. None of this says we get to go into the portal and tamper with rosters and offer guys ridiculous amounts of money to try to make them come to our school. And this is a problem. And I want to be clear about Matt Rhule too, because I think he's in a place right now where he has to say that because they don't have the money. Because I promise you, if Nebraska had the money he was talking about, he'd be doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. Cam Ward, they said, had 10 $1 million offers to transfer. And if Matt Rhule had the $1 million he needed, he probably would have been in the sweepstakes too.
Yeah, listen, I don't have a problem with the idea of this. Let's separate it. You're exactly right. This is not NIL. This is pay for play. This was a lot of the concerns ahead of, the acceptance and the transition to the NIL area. I don't have a problem with this. I even, back in the day when some conferences and schools were paying players under the table, I didn't have a problem with that either. I just wanted it, let's call it what it is. Let's start to address it. And let's start to find a solution in a path forward right now. It has gotten completely out of hand. I think there's bad actors in the space as well that are advising these young men.
Now, when you say bad actors, give some examples of what these people are doing, because I agree with you wholeheartedly.
I would say really what's happening is there's guys whispering in the ear like, hey, listen, I think I can, and I would imagine it's agents or representatives or someone in the business corner or so-called.
Or it could be a kid's uncle, who knows?
Could be their uncle, which there's probably some crossover in the Venn diagram. But I think there's people that are advising these kids for their own self-interest, getting a cut of the potential deal, rather than advising the kids the best move for their future, which might mean a short-term challenge. It's nice to see $400K hit your, checking account. That's great. A lot of these guys, also, we talked about the Michigan State player. Those dudes aren't getting $1 million. Those guys are not getting $1 million.
No, they're
not getting $500,000. I doubt they're getting $250,000.
I agree.
Right. So, but there's this illusion that that's going to be the case. So we just need to start having this conversation to find a path forward, because it is what it is. Like, us complaining about it's not going to do anything. This is where we are right now. It clearly doesn't work. We can all acknowledge that this is out of control.
Yeah.
What's the path forward is where my head's at.
Well, you mentioned the bad actors too, and I think people need to understand kind of how this thing works, because a lot of these kids do go into the portal and they have representation. And since NIL is technically marketing, right? You have agencies out there that are charging kids 20%.
Yes.
I don't know what your agent charges on a marketing deal. That's what my agent
That's the standard, yeah.
would charge on a marketing deal. So there are people advising young people to make bad decisions right now because they stand to make 20% of whatever that bad decision is. We have to find a way around that. And I'm with you too. If the idea is that we want to open this thing up to pay for play, I think we should have guidelines for it. I think that we should just go ahead and state that this is something that can happen so people know what's supposed to be going on. And I think for all the coaches out there that complain about what is happening, I think that they are a part of the bad behavior, because they complain about it to us, but behind the scenes they're trying to do the same things that everybody else is doing because they understand that it is an edge that people are gaining, and if they don't become a part of it, it becomes a problem for them. I mean, we got basically like a million different stories, and I want to kind of transition into some of what's going on with the quarterbacks here, right? Like Riley Leonard hops in the portal.
Let's talk about it.
Right, he's quarterback at Duke, announces that he's going to be in the portal. Not quite open yet. And there is a box that you can check that says do not contact. And you only do that if you know where you're getting ready to go. And all the reports are saying that he's getting ready to go to Notre Dame. How is the deal done right now?
It's tampering, right? Right? Of course, which is illegal, which hits the principle of what we're just talking about, where it's like, hey, guys, here's the rules. Leadership is not about just saying a rule that sounds good. Leadership is about creating structures and incentives to actually get people to follow those rules. This is tampering. It's been going on. We've heard coaches complain about it. There's a deal in place, and I'd imagine Notre Dame's one of those schools that can cough up a little bit more money. They're probably in the top tier of schools with potential NIL deals. Sure. So it's flat out tampering, and again, like. So Notre Dame's a good example because Brian Kelly is their coach, and he
Marcus
leaves. But okay, when Brian Kelly was their coach,
right.
He left when Notre Dame still had, albeit a long shot to go to the playoffs.
Yep.
He left to go to LSU and sent a teamworks message to his team. Again, I don't have a problem with it. You made $100 million.
Sure.
That's all good. But like. Those are the guys that are leading these young men, right? So these players are looking up to the coach and saying, well, you do it. Why can't I do it, right? You know what I mean? This is the system we've created.
Let's bring it even closer to home. Mike Elko, former Duke head coach, now at Texas A&M. What happens with his situation? So Mike Elko comes out and was like, hey, transfer portal is getting ready to open up here in a couple of weeks. You guys need to understand that there's going to be madness with this. I'm not exactly sure we're ready for what's getting ready to happen, but you just watch. And then the quote-unquote transfer portal for head coaches opens up, and he's one of the first dominoes to fall. He goes to Texas A&M, arrives down there on a private jet at about 2 a.m., right, and sends a message to his team and says, hey, I got a Zoom call scheduled for Monday morning. I would love for you all to be on it. These guys are like, why the hell am I going to get on this Zoom call, coach? Because you dipped out of here. That is, you're so spot on with the idea that the leaders are telling the players exactly how they should behave. They are, through their actions, and I'm not saying he should have stayed there, right? But his actions are definitely telling the players how they need to behave. It's a wild thing to me. And just to talk about the portal for a sec here too, and I think that this is one of the things that bothers me about it. It felt like it was created so there would be a level playing field in the turnover of rosters and the acquisition of talent. There was a process that you would formally enter the transfer portal. There would be a recruiting period, a window for people to contact you. If you need to take a visit, you can take a visit. If you need to talk to a coach, you can talk to a coach. And then decisions would be made. But in that time period, multiple people would be able to talk to you and figure out all the things they need to do to have you on campus. And the idea that cats are announcing that they're entering the portal a week before it opens, and then the deals are done.
Yeah.
That takes out the whole idea of a level playing field, which is wild to me.
So, but to me, though, I look at it and I say, you know, as we'll talk about some of the conference championships and preview the playoff, the picture later in the show, but like, hey, this has been the most parity we've had in college football.
No doubt.
I think about DJU going to Oregon State, right? Like, you know, kind of lost his job at Clemson and then he transfers out. You know, before the transfer portal, he's parked on the roster. Like, teams could concentrate their wealth. The transfer portal allows a little bit further disbursement of the wealth, but to me, like it is okay. But if we can find out a proper structure to actually level the playing field going forward,
that's my thing. Like I have no problem with guys moving around
or getting paid. I'm cool with them getting paid.
All of these things, but if we are supposed to say that we have processes in place, why don't we follow that?
Okay.
That bothers me. And then the last one I want to get to is Justin Scott, who's a 5-star defensive tackle from Illinois who was committed to Ohio State. He flips to Miami. So he's leaving the current number 6 team in the country, who just lost to the number 2 team, to the Hurricanes, who went 7-5 this year. It's not a great situation down there. And I can give you the insight and the context into this situation because I'm close to this one. He was offered an amount of money by Miami that Ohio State said, we're just not going to match that. If you want to go to a team that's struggling, instead of coming to Ohio State to be developed and to play for a team that is currently a contender, that is on you. That's on you. And he was a guy who had interest from Michigan, from Georgia, and from Alabama early on, commits to Ohio State, and then goes to Miami because they have the desperation NIL money. And this kind of gets me to the collectives thing, and I don't want to go too far into this, but that's a house of cards as well.
Sure.
And I feel like a lot of it is not sustainable, but you do get some people, some boosters, who want to put together that team. And we saw what A&M did trying to do that. And we'll see what happens.
Think about this, you know, so for this, if you know, Ohio State says we're not going to bid up, you know, and it's a difference of a couple $100,000 where it's like, well, why wouldn't you pay it? But just think about the risk, right? There's risk to action and inaction. If you pay a unproven 5-star that much money, but your starter that's producing isn't getting paid, what does that do for your culture and your locker room, right? That's the risk as well. And this is where I'm saying, like, our incentive structure with this, it's totally backwards. I'm okay with guys getting paid, but we have to figure out a better, more practical and reasonable incentive structure. It's a Wild West. Right?
I mean, the flip side of that, too, is not even the if you pay him but you don't pay him thing. Am I going to let a 17 or an 18-year-old at, you know, the last minute, right as we're getting up to signing day, try to strong-arm me by saying, hey, I've got this offer out there. You guys need to pony up a little bit more money. Maybe you're not a fit. Because I want guys like we were willing to give you something, but I ultimately want guys who want to be here, not guys who are chasing the bag. Because who knows if we give you this money and then a year later you say, well, I didn't see as much of the field as I wanted, because of course you're a freshman, you might not play as much as you want to, and then you dip out anyway.
I think you and I in the future and future shows, let's come up with some practical reasons. I think we could. Let's talk about this and try to find a path forward. So our path forward, so still to come here on Red Corner, Blue Corner, we're going to talk about the college football playoff. Should the college football playoff committee do the right thing or the best thing on Sunday? Yes, those are two different things. And we will look at Ohio State's potential path back to the playoff. That's next here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. All right, welcome back. This is Red Corner, Blue Corner, and we have a bit of breaking news making the rounds. Indiana has a new head coach, and they went out and hired James Madison's Kirk Cignetti as their new head coach. He led James Madison to an 11-1 record this year. JP, what do you think?
I think it's a good hire, right? Like you're getting a guy who was at James Madison. They level up their competition. He levels up his roster, and they pretty much match that competition. To go 11-1 as a team that's new to FBS, I think is a really powerful thing that he did. I'm curious to see how all of the ingredients come together for Indiana and Cignetti now. It makes sense on his behalf to want to take the Indiana job. He was getting paid $677,000 as a head coach at James Madison. He stands to make a lot more money than that. I would also argue that at James Madison, being in Virginia, it's a little bit more fertile in terms of recruiting than being in Indiana. The positioning of Indiana within the Big Ten, especially with expansion coming, it feels like they're losing footing, and they already didn't have a very high foothold. So I think there needs to be a very strong, well put together plan of how they are going to build and improve upon that program. But ultimately, they brought in a guy who really does know how to do those things.
Yeah, winning principles too. And like, you know, usually what schools do is they'll go out to Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, and pluck an assistant coach off the roster, which isn't necessarily bad, but what you have is a guy with head coaching experience and winning experience. And frankly, to me, I like the principle of the fact of, you know, for a school like Indiana, you have to catch a coach on his way up, right? You got to catch him right here, and ultimately, you know, ideally you catch a coach and they go on to better and better things, because that means you got a great piece during their successful start. So maybe that's Coach Kurt.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something else that you just mentioned too that I think is really wise on Indiana's behalf is I think it would have been a tough spot for a hot coordinator to jump in as their first head coaching job. And we're seeing it more and more often that guys with no head coaching experience are getting big jobs. Well, they got a guy with the head coaching experience. I think you need it at a place like Indiana where they're positioned in the Big Ten. But let's get to a little college football playoff talk here. And Kirk Herbstreit had an interesting take on the CFP, saying that he would rather see the committee do the best thing and not necessarily the right thing when it comes to playoff rankings. He talked about putting together the best matchups and not necessarily the teams that deserve to be in there the most. And so we can agree that the right thing and the best thing are not always the same thing. They can be, but not always are they the same thing. Florida State, I think, is the example here, right? The right thing, I think, is that Florida State, if they win this weekend, would be in undefeated Power 5 conference champ. The best thing would be to look at other teams who we know would be more proven against the CFP caliber of team that they're going to see here. So if I ask you the question, Florida State or Ohio State, who would be the best fit in a 14 playoff?
Could I say one thing about the best thing versus the right thing? Because I think it ties into what we talked about the whole show. This is big business. This is big business.
It is big business.
This is sport, but it's big business first. It depends to me how Florida State looks this weekend. Again, to me, if they can go out and absolutely dominate on both sides of the football, I could say, you know what, guys, you did enough. You proved it.
And I agree with you on that.
You know?
Yes.
But if they don't, then it comes down to Ohio State. I would put a couple other teams. I'm more curious about a couple other teams before Ohio State. But if they don't, and these are my two choices, I would say Ohio State get in. We've talked, I think Ohio State is one of the top 5 or 6 best teams in college football this year.
I want to respond to this comment that we got up here. It says, let's talk yellow corner versus blue corner. Red is old news. It's our guy, Pat, who is an Iowa fan. We haven't really talked that matchup because, Pat, it's not really a lot in question with that one coming up, but definitely appreciate your input there. I think that if you're being objective here, based off of what we've seen all year long, and based off of what we saw last weekend a little bit too with Florida State and Tate Rodemaker in there against a backup quarterback from Florida, and it wasn't a very dominant performance. And what we saw from Ohio State on the road playing against the number 2 team in the country now, that yes, it feels like that would be a better fit. Like Alabama might be a better fit even with 2 losses, right? Like nobody wants to say that part, right? Like I think that's what the heart of this is. But of course, it'd be really difficult to turn Florida State fans away if they are an undefeated Power 5 conference.
Yeah, they're not going to like that. But, okay, let's go through our championship week picks. Let's try to sort all the drama. And based on our picks, baby, we'll have more clarity on who will make it to the playoff. Okay, let's start out west. The rematch, the Pac-12 championship. You got Oregon versus Washington. JP, what do you got?
Yeah, I think it's really fun that 4 Big Ten teams are playing this weekend,
Isn't this
right?
beautiful?
You got 2 in the Pac-12 championship, you got 2 in the Big Ten championship. Really excited to see the way that this works out. A lot of what I'm looking at is at Oregon and the way that they have performed this year. And they have been an explosive offense, put up points with the best of them in America. They also have a top 10 defense in America as well. So from that standpoint, they're really put together. You also start to really dig into Oregon, who they are as a team. I think their best win is number 20 Oregon State. And it's like, all right, how much have they actually been tested? Meanwhile, I can look at Washington, and they had a gauntlet toward the end of their schedule. I might lean a little bit more to the more tested team in Washington, even though Vegas is telling us they like Oregon a ton here.
Are you picking Washington?
I'm picking Washington.
Okay. See, I do believe in this. All your points are right. I will say it is hard to beat a good team twice. And why is that? Because, when you won, you have to ask yourself, do we need to make adjustments, or is what we did last time good enough? On the flip side, for Oregon, they can look to that game and point at a few different instances and say, man, if we make this call, it could go our other way. I think Oregon's ready to go. I think this is Bo Nix's Heisman performance. Oregon wins. All right, let's go to the Big 12 championship. Oklahoma State versus Texas. JP?
Yeah, I'm going with Texas on this one. I think Oklahoma State has played well in some spots this year. I also think that they've looked like one of the worst teams in FBS in some spots this year. Texas, to me, has been a little bit like, they're good, but are they like elite? And I'm not sure that they're elite yet, but they're definitely good enough to win this ballgame.
All right, my next 2 picks, I'm going to paint the full picture. This is the right thing versus the best thing, Texas or Bama. I'm going to pick Texas, and I think they steamroll them this weekend to make a statement that if it's close, they could get in there. Okay, because of that, let's go to the SEC championship.
All right, give us your pick
versus
here.
Georgia. I think Bama wins. I think Bama wins. So there's going to be some drama here, Texas or Bama. Texas wins big to make a statement. I hope the committee does the right thing here, which is keep Texas in. But I do think Bama wins. JP, who do you got?
I'm going with Georgia. I think if there is one team that could beat Georgia, it would be Alabama. Nick Saban against one of his former assistants. We know what the record is there. Alabama has played great ball toward the end of the year. Jalen Milroe is a guy who's got immense talent. But Georgia is a well-put-together team. They play great defense. Their offense is really good. Carson Beck is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and nobody talks about him like that. I think these guys understand what they're up against.
We've doubted Saban. You don't want to doubt Saban all too often. All right, Big Ten championship, Iowa, Michigan. This one doesn't need much time. What do you got?
Michigan.
Okay, I got Michigan as well. ACC, let's go to Louisville and Florida State.
This is a drama one, right? Like, I think this is the one that a lot of people are looking at because this is going to be one of the bigger dominoes here. As you said, if Florida State wins this and they look good, there is no doubt that they should be in the 4-team playoff. But I look at Louisville as a team that is aggressive defensively. They run fronts where they put guys toward the line of scrimmage. They want to get after quarterbacks. They want to create chaos. And for a quarterback who has not played a ton of reps this year, I think that becomes the difference in the game for Louisville to win it.
And Jeff Brom. Playing against Jeff Brom in a big game might be one of the most terrifying things of all time.
Yeah.
I think Louisville pulls it off, JP.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. Like, I think this is a really good slate for championship weekend here. A lot of things for us to keep an eye on. So really excited about the
One of us is going to be happy and one of us is going to be sad next week.
I'll tell you what, man.
We're walking the fence.
Yeah. All right, appreciate everybody joining us here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. For Jake Butt, I'm Joshua Perry, and we'll see you here next week on Stadium.